The Punisher from 2004 is yet another underrated Marvel movie in my opinion, and while John Travolta as Howard Saint wasn't exactly the best, I did think that Thomas Jane played a pretty badass Punisher, which is why I thought it was actually pretty cool to see him in Spider-Man 2, which basically confirmed that he was in the same universe as Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. And so that got me thinking, what if they had met? What if Punisher permanently relocated from Tampa to New York and was actually around for the events of the next movie? Simply put, what if the Punisher was in Spider-Man 3? So the Punisher and Spider-Man are officially in the same universe. That cameo at the end of Spider-Man 2 is canon, and he does make a comeback in Spider-Man 3. So what now? Well, for starters, it should be noted that we're seeing a very different version of the Punisher in this movie compared to his own. Because, yeah, he got his revenge on Howard Saint, but he's still not okay. In fact, his family's deaths only continue to haunt him more and more as time goes on. And he starts taking his aggression out on criminals a lot more, and drinks a lot more than he already did. So, no, he's not in a very good way. And I know I've quoted this many, many times before, but I'm going to quote it again. In Batman Forever, when Bruce Wayne says that revenge doesn't help you, it just makes it worse. Because then you start becoming obsessed with one face, and then another, until the next thing you know, your life has just become revenge. And I think that that would apply to the Punisher. So yeah, it's been like 2 or 3 years since he got his revenge, but honestly, it didn't look like he was very satisfied by the end of his movie. So he's still not satisfied now. If anything, he's actually worse. But now let's just say that he's in New York City and he's making his mark. Criminals are just being taken down left, right, and center, and Spider-Man, well, he hasn't been able to stop him. In fact, he has yet to even meet the Punisher. Punisher is just like a ghost and Spider-Man can't find him anywhere. So there's this little hint of doubt in the back of Peter's head because he can't stop this one guy. And oh yeah, you can bet your ass that J. Jonah Jameson is just having a field day with that. He uses the fact that Spider-Man hasn't caught him as a reason to slander him and say, oh, he's probably working with the Punisher to kill all these criminals. And then plus, on top of all the stuff with the Punisher and J. Jonah Jameson, Harry Osborn just tried to kill him. So yeah, of course he still gets hit on the head and he gets his memory wiping concussion. But Peter is now once again, for the second movie in a row, overwhelmed by his various responsibilities. He's going out to fight crime more and more often, and so is the Punisher, because they both feel like they have something to prove. Frank isn't satisfied with the revenge he got on Howard Saint, because vengeance doesn't bring his family back to him, and killing is the only thing that temporarily helps him forget about them. So the story of this movie for him is basically his failure to move on and overcome his alcoholism, because he does try to overcome his addiction, but he just keeps finding himself going right back to the bottle again because he can't cope. So now Peter's relationship with Mary Jane Watson is actually worse in this timeline than it was in the actual movie. Because Peter is barely home, and when he is, he's wounded, and now he won't even talk to her anymore. They argue a lot when they do talk, though, because Peter is so desperate to show New York that he is trying to do right by them. He does want to stop the Punisher, but he's just becoming more and more difficult to find, because now he's become so famous that there's actually Punisher copycats trying to do the exact same thing as him. So yeah, now Peter's getting frustrated because every time he thinks he's got the Punisher beat, he doesn't. He just can't find him anywhere. And Punisher's style of crime fighting is proving to be really effective. And some New Yorkers are actually starting to love Punisher more than Spider-Man. I mean, plenty of people still do love Spider-Man, don't get me wrong. But Punisher, in some people's minds, is the one that's actually putting criminals away for good. And Peter is getting really pissed off about that now because he's already paranoid about Harry getting his memories back. Then the Sandman becomes a thing, and then turns out to be Uncle Ben's killer. Plus, his relationship with Mary Jane is going to shit, and now the Punisher is inadvertently taking his spotlight. So yeah, he doesn't even have the support of New York really behind him, at least not all of them. So yeah, that's of course, when he's at his worst once again, that Peter gets the black suit. So now, since Peter's circumstances are different and arguably even worse in this movie because he doesn't have the entire city's positive feedback to use as a cushion, Peter just finds himself becoming even more susceptible to the suit. I mean, he just becomes full-on addicted to it. Every time he doesn't feel very good, he puts the suit on and it makes him feel better. And so now he's actually even angrier because he feels like he has to prove something. So he starts stepping up his game. He's breaking criminals' bones and nearly killing them. He actually becomes exactly what he was trying not to become, a menace. And now, meanwhile, Frank has been hiding out in the deepest, darkest parts of New York City, the real shitholes. He never stays in one place more than once and is generally just living his worst life. In his rare off time, he works a shitty job and he drinks a lot. He becomes even more disconnected from society day by day and has now almost become just like a machine, just going through the motions. Killing is really the only thing that's making him feel anything anymore because he's just so numb all the time. And things get bad enough for him that he gets way too drunk to be crime fighting and he accidentally shoots a kid. Now, he didn't know it was just a kid at first doing the robbery, but the guilt that he feels really sets in, and his supporters in New York actually begin to turn on him because of this incident. And so now, similar to Spider-Man, what little positive feedback he had, he no longer has because he made a huge mistake. And so now Peter seemingly kills the Sandman, and he has his house fight with Harry, and Peter has just become very, very addicted to the black suit. I mean, some newspapers are even mocking the new suit, saying it's just Spider-Man's attempt to be just like the Punisher. And he hates that because he's done so much for New York, and he doesn't even get the respect he feels he deserves anymore. And I mean, yeah, he had gotten criticism before as Spider-Man in previous movies, but he had never gotten this kind of criticism while he was under the influence of the symbiote. So Peter begins taking this criticism to heart, and his hunt for the Punisher becomes even more obsessive and even personal. He obsessively listens to those police scanners. In fact, Peter starts becoming so hostile that he accidentally murders a criminal. And yeah, he does exactly the same thing the Punisher did. He kills somebody that he didn't mean to. He didn't mean to kill the criminal, but he's been letting himself go, and the man died because of it. And that's actually when the NYPD officially issue an arrest warrant for Spider-Man. So yeah, Peter is really just at his absolute worst. And I know it sounds like I'm making them both out to be going through the same storyline, but believe me, it really does have a purpose. I think that Spider-Man accidentally killing somebody and Punisher accidentally killing somebody will help you to realize just how even they are, even though their methods are so different. Besides, I do think it's important to do it this way just to show that they're both just at their worst. And so now, by this point, the Punisher had been curious about Spider-Man. I mean, he never had a problem with him. He respects the hell out of him. But now the hunt is on because there's a warrant out for his arrest. So he's a criminal now, officially. So Punisher is actually hunting down Spider-Man. And the reason he wants to do this is because he feels extremely guilty of murdering that boy. I mean, it keeps him awake at night, and he needs to make up for it, and he thinks that he needs to stop somebody really high profile to do so. So now we cut to a scene where Spider-Man is swinging off away from the police, who are actually trying to shoot him down. And then finally a bullet cuts through his web and sends him crashing down onto a rooftop down below. Now Spider-Man reaches his feet, and he finds out it was the Punisher who shot him down using a sniper rifle. Now, the cops are trying to get onto the roof to capture these two, but Punisher had chained the entrance to the roof closed. So it's just Punisher and Spider-Man, mano-a-mano. Now, Peter is obviously pissed about this, and Frank tells Spider-Man that it's nothing personal and he respected the hell out of him. But he's become a danger to the city. And Frank then depressingly kind of admits that New York in his opinion, deserves better heroes than either of them. Of course, Peter would disagree with this, and an epic fight ensues between the two. Everybody in New York is turned on Spider-Man and the Punisher. Neither of them feel like they have anything to lose at this point. And so, yeah, I mean, Punisher is in fact so low at this point, he almost wants to die rather than live with all of his guilt. So this fight is just absolutely brutal. There are bullets being shot. There are wounds being made. These two are trying to kill each other almost. And in the end, Punisher manages to badly wound Spider-Man with a bullet through the leg, but Spider-Man ultimately does win the fight by webbing Punisher up and leaving him to be arrested. And Peter says that Punisher should be grateful that he didn't do worse. He says that if he wants forgiveness, then he should find religion. Now, then he leaves him to be arrested. And now Punisher actually could break free from the webs. I mean, he has a knife in his hand. But then he remembers everything that he's ever done. And he just can't find the will to escape. So he drops the knife and he actually lets himself be arrested. So now Peter has a lot of weight off of his shoulders now, and he starts to relax, but not in a good way. He actually starts to make a serious ass of himself everywhere he goes, just like he did in the actual movie. He does his dancing in the streets, he starts making moves on all the women around him, and even asks out Betty Brant on a date. And yes, I'm saying Betty, but not Gwen Stacy, because he doesn't get the key of the city, so he doesn't kiss Gwen, all that stuff doesn't happen. So he asks out Betty instead to the same club that Mary Jane is now working at because he's a petty motherfucker. And the same scene from the movie would then ensue with Peter just humiliating Mary Jane and making Betty just full-on slap Peter and leave in disgust. Peter would then, of course, pick a fight with the bouncers before he accidentally hits Mary Jane to the floor. And it's in that moment that he starts getting flashes of the man he killed and how he nearly killed his best friend and now he's hit the love of his life. And he finally realizes just how terrible the suit has made him become. He remembers about the Punisher telling him that New York deserves better heroes than them. And those words start echoing him in his mind as he sits atop the church tower in the rain. Now Peter is desperate to get the black suit off. He's trying to remove it. But little does he know that Frank Castle is down below in the cathedral. He managed to escape from jail after finding that he didn't want to end his life in there. You see, he's once again become suicidal because, yeah, remember, he was suicidal at the end of his movie and he was drunk at that point. And now he's completely sober for the first time in a very long time. There's no way for him to block out this pain he's feeling, and he doesn't feel like he can stay apart from his family anymore. And so now he's not a religious man anymore. He was raised in a Catholic school, and at one point he wanted to become a priest, but he lost his faith. But now he feels drawn towards God in what he thinks will be his last moments. And he says to God that he expresses no regret for killing those scumbag criminals. And he has no problem with God sending them to hell. But he asks for God to not take his wrath out on his family for the actions that he did, because he hopes to see them again soon. And that's when he hears Spider-Man screaming at the top of the tower. So now Peter's ripping off the suit, and it lands not on Eddie Brock, but on the Punisher. Yeah, because think about it. Peter doesn't pursue Gwen Stacy. He doesn't get Eddie Brock fired. So Eddie doesn't become Venom. The Punisher becomes Venom. And he goes on the largest killing spree that he's ever been on before. And he actually feels good for the first time since his family was still alive, because he was miserable throughout his entire movie, even when he was getting his revenge. I mean, look at that face. Is that the face of a man that's truly satisfied? And the symbiote, it makes him feel a lot stronger, a lot better than he's felt in years. So now he no longer wants to die. He wants to live, and he wants to kill. So now that Peter knows that the Punisher has become Venom, he is pissing himself in fear, and so he's extremely worried about MJ and Aunt May's safety. And so that's when he decides to finally tell May that he's Spider-Man, and she says that she already knows that. Of course she already knew that, because it was sort of implied in Spider-Man 2 and 3 that she already knew that. You know, every boy needs a hero. You know, that seemed pretty directed towards him. But even if she already knows, this is still a very big moment for Peter. Now, Peter tells MJ from the bottom of his heart that he is so sorry for everything that he put her through. That as soon as he got her, like he'd always wanted to, he neglected her. He put the Punisher before her, and he feels so sorry. He says that she deserves a guy much better than himself. And MJ is just crying. She has tears in her eyes because she knows that he's telling the truth, that this really is coming from the bottom of his heart. Peter then says that whether he agreed with the Punisher's methods or not, he needs to help him get rid of that symbiote, because whether he agreed with it or not, he was doing much, much better before than he is now. Then he just looks up at Aunt May and MJ and he says a very, very emotional farewell. He says he very well may die. He may very well never see either of them ever again. And MJ just tells Peter that despite their issues, she never ever stopped caring and loving him, and she does want him to come home. The two then kiss. Peter would then, of course, give Aunt May a very, very heartfelt hug. And then, now, coming back to the action, soon Venom, Punisher, and the returning Sandman are just going at it in the middle of New York. And Peter realizes that he needs help against these two humongous threats. So he goes to his best friend, Harry Osborn, for help. And Harry says that, frankly, Peter doesn't deserve his help after everything he put him through. Of course, then the butler would conveniently tell him that his father was killed by the blades of his own glider, and Harry changes his mind. That was dumb, but it still happens, whatever. So Spider-Man, he has to go alone to try and break up the fight between the Punisher and the Sandman. He tries so hard to get Frank to take off the suit, but he says no. He says that Spider-Man doesn't know what he's been through and how much he needs this suit. It's the first time he's felt alive in so long. He does not want to give up the one thing that's made him feel better since his family was still alive. But then, Spider-Man does the unthinkable. He actually unmasks before the Punisher, and he tells him that his name is Peter Parker, and he knows what it's like to lose family, and to be dependent on the symbiote. Peter says that while he doesn't agree about killing criminals, that he'd rather the Punisher was on his side. Peter then repeats what the Doctor told him in the last movie, that great, great line. He says that we all have a choice. And Frank is finally humbled by this, and he does realize that the alcohol that he's been always drinking, just like it, the suit has become yet another way for him to not face the past. He remembers how he nearly shot himself at the end of his movie, but it was the memories of his family that made him change his mind. And so he uses those same memories and decides to take the suit off. Harry would then, of course, arrive, and they all work together to get the symbiote off of Frank and destroy it forever, symbolically getting rid of all of their grievances and all of their hatred and depression. These three who used to be enemies are now all united under one cause. Then they all work together to stop the Sandman. So yeah, Harry actually survives this movie, and he goes on to become a hero in his own right. And Punisher has finally learned to stop relying on his addictions to get him through the day. He finally learns how to stand on his own 2 feet without having to depend on anything. Because honestly, that's what the suit was. The symbiote was a representation of addiction, whether that was to drugs or alcohol or whatever. It was a metaphor. I mean, legitimately, every time Peter felt horrible in Spider-Man 3, the suit was the first thing he would go to. And that's exactly why it makes so much sense for the Punisher to become Venom, because he was so dependent on booze. And that was, in his movie, and now it's years later, and now he has the death of a young boy on his conscience. So that's why I think this all makes so much sense. It paints a beautiful, tragic story of a man just trying to get through his own demons to become a better man. And so now the Sandman will, of course, go on to tell his story about how he killed Uncle Ben by accident, and Peter, he still forgives him. It's really hard for Peter, of course, to forgive him, but he does. And now Frank would actually let the Sandman go because, he says he owes one to Peter for saving his life. He then absolutely, of course, thanks Peter for helping him to get over these issues that he's been struggling with. He then says, of course, that he'll see him around, and Peter laughs and says he sure hopes not, which earns him a rare Punisher smile, actually. And so now, the Punisher, of course, would still be a fugitive, so I don't know if this scene would actually happen, but I really would like this to be the last scene for the Punisher in this movie, which would be a scene of him entering Alcoholics Anonymous with a picture of his family carefully tucked away in his pocket. And that is what if the Punisher had been in Spider-Man 3. So yeah, I know I made some controversial decisions. I know it's going to seem redundant that I made both the Spider-Man and Spider-Man and the Punisher both kill people because they went too far. I know that sounds like I'm repeating myself, but I'm telling you, like, I really think it would do a good job of putting them both in the same position. And yeah, I honestly do think Punisher would make mistakes like that. And I do think, Spider-Man would accidentally kill a criminal because he's even angrier in this timeline. Because his relationship with MJ is worse, his life in general is worse because of the Punisher. I did end up having a good time making this. Please check out Thomas Jane's Punisher. It's really good. And also check out the Dirty Laundry short film. It's also fantastic. And of course, I don't have to say it, watch the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies. I really hope he's in No Way Home. I really do. And make sure to give me more what if recommendations in the comments down below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and share it with all of your friends on all your various social media platforms. And I'll see all you guys in the next video.